Hello, everyone. This is Trey Parker,
And this is Matt Stone.
and welcome to our stunning and brave introduction of season 19.
It's our introduction that we're doing to the season 2 months after the season is done.
Yeah,
We're doing
and
the introduction.
it was definitely people have a lot of questions for us about this season because it was definitely sort of a new thing for us to try, and people were wondering sort of how much of that we had figured out ahead of time, and sort of how we decided to do a way more serialized run, and it is kind of interesting. I mean, even to us, because it had sort of started the season before, actually, in season 18, where we just kind of, I don't know, maybe out of boredom, just started like carrying things over and saying, "Oh, remember that thing that happened? Like maybe that should matter." Like we just, it's been many years of doing South Park, and it's like always big things happen and then everything resets and starts over again, which obviously you kind of need because you sort of want your town to be the same. But we were just like, well, what if it's not the same? What if some things actually matter more and do change, have permanence to them? And so we kind of started playing with it last season, just with stuff like Randy being Lord. But there was another interesting thing that happened, which was that that season started with the startup company episode. And then we did another episode that was sort of tech heavy, and then we ended up doing like the VR episode, and then a whole show about Twitter. And we kept saying in the room, like, we would come up with something funny we kind of wanted to do as an episode, and we're like, yeah, but that's another tech show. Like, we got to do something completely different, because that's just the way we've always thought before. We've always thought like, well, if you do this kind of show, then the next week you got to just do something totally dumb and different and whatever, and then the next week do something different. And I think that it wasn't until almost the end of that run that we're like, well, fuck it. All these shows are kind of tech. And we realized that if we had embraced that from the beginning and said, we're doing this like tech run, and it's all going to be about tech shows, and we're going to, have a lot of crossover and everything, and we're going to, thematically make them match, it actually would have made those shows better probably and made that run better. And we had talked about that before this season started, that like, why be so scared of that, and
Well, it also, I think we started television in a different era, and
Yeah.
it was a sitcom era, and because everyone made shows so you could syndicate them, and they would get all jumbled up, so you didn't know what order your show would show in when it replayed, because repeats were so important, and you had to reset. It's a sitcom model, and then we've been on the air so long that, like, in the last 5 years, or like everybody else, 10 years, whatever, it's like TV went in this totally different direction, and now, so many people watch online, and it's like it'll just show you the next episode. It's not hard to figure out what the next episode is, and people like that kind of stuff, and we like those kind of shows too. I guess we're kind of a little bit jealous of shows where they could take on bigger stuff and not have to reset. And also just writing wise, we have so many times we're like, okay, the kids are on Mars, and like one of them has this going, like, how can we get back to
Zero?
How do we reset? And it was going to be such a pain in the ass, so I think that, like Trey said, that was part of it, was recognizing that the shows can still kind of stand on their own and have their own little theme, but start having elements that kind of continue. So we kind of did a half and half. We kind of
knew that, but we didn't know, but we had no idea what that would be. And so we also were like, yeah, but we don't need to do that. Like, fuck that. We always are also just like, look, what should the first show be? That's what we always kind of just figure out. Let's figure out a funny first show. And I think that, and also funnily, right before this season started, we had not even renegotiated. We just decided like we would do more. We signed up to do another 3 years on top of basically we signed up for another 5 years of South Park, and we were kind of like, oh, cool, we're gonna, and then we kind of sat there going, dude, fuck, what the fuck are we gonna do, and also realizing like, dude, we better like update some shit. Like, we've been around so long that like a lot of shit doesn't make sense. Like, we're in a town without like a brew pub and shit like that. And like, we started talking about just the idea that we kind of we're just like, we really should start updating our animation and updating a little bit of our locations and stuff like that. And then that led us into the bigger discussion of like how funny it was that we were kind of this relic left over from sort of another time that like gets away with shit that so many other shows can't, and also just sort of like, just seemed like kind of lost in a time warp. And then honestly, it was really just we were like, what could be a funny first show is to sort of talk about how this rebirth of PC culture and how it's big in colleges again, and there seems to be a lot of people talking about how PC is back whether it is or not. And like, we're like, it'd be pretty funny a PC person coming in and seeing this old outdated show and being like, what the fuck? Why is this still on the fucking air? You know what I mean? And like having someone be able to come in and yell at us and be like, what the fuck is going on here? And it sort of coupled with the idea of, since, a lot of the PC stuff we were hearing about was happening in colleges, we're like, thinking about frat boys and shit like that, about like, a total like young frat boy being super aggro PC, ready to sort of rip his shirt off at the bar to fucking protect people's from, from their safe spaces and shit. And so
that was really the first kind of joke. We just had that character going into the season.
Yeah, and we were
PC
just
Principal.
laughing
we were just
about
fucking joking around with that.
I think first we were just kind of riffing on like PC frat guys, and we were all doing the voices and stuff, and we're all like, guys ready to throw down because they're not PC enough and shit. And then we just decided like, oh, what if this is like a new guy who's principal? And we all laughed at the name PC Principal. So we're like, all right, yeah, PC Principal, that's a sweet character. But of course, and we're still stuck in our old thinking. And for a long time, we're like, okay, cool. We got our first episode. PC Principal shows up, and then at the end of the show, how do we kill him? Right? How do we kill him so that everything's back to normal for episode 2? And that's when we kind of realized it's like, no, wait, this is the shit we're talking about. Like, we shouldn't kill him. We should keep the dude around and have him sort of this new voice. And also we kind of, as we were digging more into the PC stuff, we're like, oh yeah, and then he can be pissed about that. Oh, and he can be pissed about he can be pissed about, illegal immigrants instead of undocumented immigrants. He can be, and we're like, dude, these could all almost be shows. And without really knowing what those shows would be or what the topics could be, I think we just kind of realized it was a big thing and we should keep this guy around.
Yeah. And it started opening this whole thing where I like the conversation with, like updating the town and updating the show and making the show sort of serialized as part of that too. I mean, there's a part of it's happening to the forum and it's happening to the town. And then there's a guy kind of bitching at the town going, you need to fucking modernize, man. Look at you.
Yeah.
And it's funny because now when we go back to Denver, because we both grew up, the Denver area. And Denver is really different. And we're now old enough to kind of see that and to see those changes and sort of like keep doing our town and keep kind of representing this part of Colorado. Like, here's the hick bar. It's like, well, there are hick bars, but what's really going on in Colorado? There's microbreweries everywhere, and there's Whole Foods. There's Whole Foods everywhere, and these old supermarkets that we have in our show from the '90s, which really were supermarkets based on like supermarkets from the '70s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people don't. There's a whole new experience going on, so it just unlocked all this stuff. And
well, it was funny because of course
we're thinking about.
But remember, we did episode 1, and of course, just like every season, we thought, okay, well, this episode sucks. We just got to get through it, and we'll do something else. And then people responded to it pretty well, and we're like, oh, okay, people like PC Principal. All right, that's good. But we still, I don't think, had a real, we're like, okay, it's kind of like PC stuff we're talking about. And that's why for the next episode, the second one, when we did the stuff about, the immigrants from Canada, we're like, oh, okay, well, that's perfect. We've got PC Principal, and he can be pissed off that, people aren't totally accepting of this. And it's part of why, South Park has to be so accepting of it. But then there's Garrison going, no, fuck this and fuck you. And we knew that PC Principal and Garrison were going to butt heads eventually, so it happened in the second show. But, we also were just like, that also just started off going, oh, I guess we got to do a Trump show because everyone's talking about Trump, even though we were kind of like, man, that sounds really easy and it sounds really base. And we were definitely like at first like, okay, we made a little Trump, and we're like, no, fuck him. We're not going to give him the satisfaction of being in the show. We'll make one of our characters Trump-like, and so that became Garrison. And we sort of got our whole Trump thing out and sent Garrison on his way. But it really wasn't until the third show, which, I think was one of the hardest shows. But I think it's because it actually started to really galvanize what the season was going to be about. And again, we didn't have it planned. It's just that in starting to talk about all this stuff and talking about South Park so much wanting to update, and so South Park wanting to prove, hey, no, we're hip, we're cool, we're PC, we're all right. That, the idea that what would finally really prove that is having a Whole Foods, and that was, sort of the award that you get for being an updated PC kind of town. And I think that, that
it would legitimize you.
Yeah, it legitimizes you. And so
there's a real divide. Once you get over that divide, you're real.
Yeah. And we really just kind of, at first, I don't think we even had the idea for the Whole Foods until like the Monday of that show. I think that first we were just talking about these arts and foods districts that are popping up everywhere, Lodos and NoHos and all that stuff. And, we came up with the name Soto Sopa and thought it was pretty funny. And then we were talking about how, you always see commercials for these places and they all look the same. And I remember thinking like, oh God, what do I have in my head? I had this thing in my head of like what it should be. And it actually turned out to be Steve Wynn's. If you ever go to a Steve Wynn hotel in Vegas, especially the Wynn Hotel itself, there's a channel on there where he introduces you to everything the hotel has to offer. And it's great. I'm telling you, like, go to Vegas and just go to that room just to sit there and listen to it because it's pretty awesome. But it's basically like, Steve Wynn, who I guess got directed to get as close on the mic as possible and talk really quietly. And it gets funnier and funnier because he's not trying to be funny, but he basically keeps going. At first he starts off like, well, are you in the mood for some food? Well, get on downstairs. And then it gets even worse to where it's just like, then it starts to cut to like the nightlife and it's like, well, maybe you're looking for some nightlife. It's like you could barely hear what he's saying. It's just like, it's so funny and so like I had a great time just doing that and getting up on the mic. And then we were just like finding shit, video wise, because we used a lot of real video in it to just make these commercials. And we actually didn't have much for the idea for the show, except we kept making these commercials because we thought they were so funny. And then we finally, we really,
anything else figured out, we did all the commercials.
And then we finally got the idea of like, oh, let's do this whole foods thing, and that can be and I think that after we did that show, we're like, okay, they've gotten this arts, they got their Whole Foods, and now they're pretty much up their own ass about how cool and update and PC they are, and now shit's gonna start going wrong. And so that kind of took us into the next show, which is like, well, obviously, if you've got a lot of nice restaurants and a lot of hip places, the next thing you have is a lot of Yelp reviewers.
Yeah, a lot of the city part of town, and I feel like it started the beginning with the Stunning and Brave and PC stuff. It kind of, one thing we talked about a lot with the rebranding of the town is how much of this stuff is rebranding and updating and renaming, but shit's kind of just the same. Or, shit is better, or it's gets to belong to a different era. But a lot of PC stuff is like, no, we don't say that anymore. We say this. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like, no,
still the same shitty emotions.
Yeah, or it's the same whatever it is. Or that's not the shitty part of town. That's Satipa town now. And it's like, okay.
All right.
And how much of that is just window dressing, and how much of the town's same anxieties and bullshit exist underneath, but now they feel like there should be better.
Yeah.
And then when you're still a fuck up, it sucks that much more because, you're supposed to be a Whole Foods person. You're supposed to have arrived,
Yeah, and the Yelp episode was fun. I think it's probably the most polarizing of I have a lot of people saying, oh my God, that Yelp review episode was just like the best. And then just as many, if not more people saying that run was amazing except for that Yelp episode. So I don't know whether it's just that it's either people that kind of are in the restaurant business saying, oh, that was awesome, and then people that do reviews for things going, what are you talking about? And it's pretty cool that we can do that. So
I think it's people in the restaurant business or anybody who's worked in the restaurant business, which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's that divide of like, if you've never worked in the restaurant business, then of course you would go in and say, hi, I'm a Yelp reviewer. It's like, if you ever worked in the restaurant business, don't say that. Don't say that before your food comes.
Yeah.
Because you will be eating boogers and cum.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell people that before your food comes.
And I actually remember Matt saying in the writer's room, well, we should definitely let people know that they're going to get boogers and cum in their food, by doing this. And I'm like,
service.
And I was like, that sounds like a song to me. So and then basically after we had the boogers and cum song, we're like, dude, everything else, whatever, we'll figure out the rest of the show. We got boogers and cum at the end. It's like a pretty satisfying song. And, a lot of us have kids now, which is pretty funny. And it's such a catchy song that we all end up having our kids coming through the building at one point or another while we're doing episodes. And inevitably a lot of the kids started walking around singing boogers and cum. It's pretty funny listening to the 3-year-olds saying that. But yeah, so, then we got into Safe Space, which is funny because it came from, I think there was only kind of one other sketch idea we had before we even had any of this, when we first got together and talked about, what could possible shows be? And we were like, it was a funny sketch idea of Randy going into a grocery store and the whole thing where he's getting asked to give $1, and then how much they'll make you feel horrible for not giving $1, and how ridiculous that could get. And we're like, oh my God, now we've got a Whole Foods. It's perfect, So it's like that just seemed to sort of present itself, which was kind of nice, and it was great to start playing on Randy's feelings of, you knew how much from the City Part of Town episode, you knew how much the Whole Foods meant to Randy. And now this thing was betraying him.
And then we really did think reality was going to be a big part of the season when we first came up with reality. We thought that was really great
that's
stuff.
Funny. And then at the end, we did kill him at the end because we're like, fuck it, let's kill him. So yeah, and then we finally got to, which is interesting, the episode with Tweek and Craig. Because we had
that was sort of a different one.
Yeah,
but
it ended up, of course, having a lot. It was great having PC Principal there to talk about, and basically, and for the town to be like, yes, this is so proves how cool and up to date we are, and again, it's basically kind of the show saying, look how cool and up to date we are. We now have a gay, couple on it, and so, and how how proud shows can be of themselves for having a gay couple on it, now, and so it's just like. We talked about that, but that had come from a few years ago. I was kind of watching this weird Yowie art popping up, and different people would show it to us and go, oh, look at this cool thing of Tweek and Craig. And it's like they're making out and they're doing whatever. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? And we just thought it was really weird and funny and like, super cool. Because a lot of it was like, there's so much of it out there on the internet.
It was such a weird episode if you didn't know anything about, which I assume a lot of people don't know anything about that. And that was what we were trying to do in the episode, is go, what the fuck is this? Just like the way we did.
Yeah.
What the fuck is
Especially
this?
Tweek and Craig going, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
But I really actually, I think it's my favorite of the run, actually, just because I really love the stuff where, they Tweek and Craig say, look, we just got to break up in front of everybody. And then Tweek's like, I can't, I'm not good at that stuff. And Craig kind of talks him into it. And it's like, gives him a big pep talk and then Tweek, and then they go do it. And Tweek's so awesome at it that it actually fucks Craig. And like, I just thought that was really cool plot wise. And the interesting part about it too, was that we actually wanted to just use all this Yowie art that it was out there on the internet, because we had all these moments of showing this stuff and we're like, oh, it's just so great. We can use this and this and this and this. But what we found, and of course, this is part of us doing a show in 6 days and doing it the week, airing it the week that we come up with it, is that there just wasn't enough time to find who had done what and try to get it, try to get the rights to it and try to not just fuck people over by putting their stuff up on the show. And so we had to put a call out, I think it was on like Saturday or something, to like, hey, if you got Yowie art of Tweek and Craig, like draw it, do it. And then we had people in our building, like all the artists that could actually have some fun actually drawing for the change. And
yeah, some of that art's amazing.
Yeah. And so, but we needed tons of images, because then we started putting in these big montages with like Peter Gabriel, and stuff like that we're like, man, we need a lot of this stuff. And so right up until the last minute, we were feverishly having people draw Tweek and Craig Yowie art to fill it in, and everything. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, and we did that karaoke, that little live shoot out in the parking lot with those.
Yeah, that was just, that was pretty fun. And then we went right into Naughty Ninjas, which only came from us going, don't ISIS kind of look like ninjas? And that was it. And like started trying to do a whole show around that. But obviously,
it's like that. It was that same joke too of like, I liked playing ninjas when I was kids too, and it sounds really fun to go put on some masks and do some be stinkers, you know what I mean, and run around town and fuck shit up, you know what I mean. And there's some part of ISIS that seems like it's a little bit of that.
Just being stinkers.
Sure does. Just putting on masks and being stinkers up and
But it was funny because we got into it and we're like, wow, this is really a lot again like what we've been talking about, because when the show started, we had Officer Barbrady, the big dumb bumbling cop, which is like so late 90s, right? So it's like the big dumb bumbling sheriff that's so like what the show started as. And over the 19 years that we've been doing the show, we actually needed real police. So slowly a real police force has shown up in South Park, and there's an actually police department. There's Detective Yates. And, we're like, we didn't even know in our own heads does Barbrady work for them? Does like what,
Right.
And so we're like, well, it's almost time to answer that. And in a way, this was kind of our, in our same way that we're kind of updating and getting ready for the future, we are we're kind of getting rid of Bar Brady, and also in the PC world, kind of talking about how you can't do that shit anymore, cops. So.
And it's not funny.
Yeah.
And even in the show, it's just like the comedy line of what is funny with police from Bar Brady being Andy Griffith, or like not Andy Griffith but a dumb version of Andy Griffith or whatever. That doesn't even the comedy line is moved of what people want to laugh about with cops, and it felt out of date, and that actually I think that doesn't have that episode have my favorite line of the season is Randy goes, "Wow, we've only had a Whole Foods a few weeks and we already don't need cops."
And we don't need cops. That's pretty awesome.
That's it.
Yeah, I love that.
That's the whole season in a nutshell. That kind of added, Randy sort of encapsulating that kind of dumb, reduction of that whole thing. That's totally what Randy would think. Great. Yeah. We don't need we got a Whole Foods. We're those people now.
Yeah, and then so meanwhile, while we're doing all this shit, we kept almost every week in the writers' room, we kept basically talking about this other idea about advertising and how much it's changed, because that's another thing for us that it's also how ads work. When we started out the show, it's like we were on a channel and there were ads at the commercials, and it was that simple, and then now basically it's like between Hulu and just our own online stuff and everything, it's just like how ads work and everything has completely changed. And it was just another point of discussion.
DVRs weren't around when we started.
Yeah,
DVR, just that idea of skipping ads, and then the whole arms race between advertisers and ad blockers and DVRs, and then the ad goes. I mean, people forget that before DVRs, the idea of putting, maybe it was, I don't know if DVRs exactly, but the idea of putting something in the lower third of the frame that would go, "Hey, up next, watch this next show." It's just such a douchey thing. It's just so douchey. It's like you're watching something. What the fuck are you doing? But now that's commonplace because with DVRs and everything, it's the only time they can get you. And so, I don't know. We really got off on this idea of doing an AI, kind of inspired by Ex Machina and Blade Runner, and this idea that ads have gained consciousness and ads actually exist on, that they're replicants and ads that they don't know they're ads, and that kind of stuff from Ex Machina and Blade Runner and stuff. We kind of got off on that trip, and we decided to make a multi-parter, which was pretty sweet, but then a little hard in the middle.
Yeah, no,
it was pretty sweet, and then the middle was really hard. So we decided the whole season had sort of serialized elements, but it wasn't totally serialized, and then in the last 3 episodes, we went totally serialized, which I have to say I was a total proponent of, and I was totally wrong because it was fucking hard. Yeah. And the difference between, you can see with every show except for the 9th show, except for because then we came back around and had guns. Every show has its theme, and the 9th show is the only one where we tried to just keep all the balls going, kind of like other serialized shows do. Yeah. And
we kind of lost track of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and it was hard, and it was really hard for us to do, and it was. I thought it'd be not easier, but we thought it would, I don't know, unlock and be different and fun, and instead it was kind of hard.
Yeah, and actually we were almost super fucked because we did that, and we didn't feel great about the 9th show, and then we were getting to the 10th show, and we're like, fuck, we got to just basically do that again, because we're just talking about all the same shit again, and we don't know how to, and again, we didn't want to wrap things up. We just wanted to have some satisfying kind of okay, things are still around and things are still happening, but there's some kind of thing. And then luckily we just kind of came up with I think it was on Thursday, it was in the beginning, but we came with this thing going, maybe, because everyone that week was talking about how everyone was going out and buying guns, and the whole gun control thing was back in the forefront of the news, as it often is. But we were just like, that's what this whole thing has been about now at the end, is everyone's freaking out and paranoid, and wait, maybe this whole PC thing isn't what we were promised, and maybe this whole, Soda Sopa Shitipa Town thing isn't what we thought it would be. And we liked all that language of it, but then we, finally came up with the idea of and then everyone goes out and gets guns. And that's what the show's really about, and the whole end of the season is about, is everyone goes and gets guns, and then everything's awesome. And guns, And actually, the title of it, which we should have stuck with, because I see on here looking that we ended up calling it PC Principle Final Justice, but we were going to call it Gun Solve Everything. And that's really that's really more what the show was. It's like, okay, we've set all this shit up, we've done all this. People don't know who to trust. People are mad at each other, and then everyone gets a gun, and everyone's like, oh man, these things are great, and they work out all their problems. And we're still there, and we know that, and we wanted it to be that, like, it's not like this whole advertising thing goes away, because we're kind of keeping that around, and the whole idea that the enemy is out there and that ads are out there and they are plotting their next thing they're always going to be there and they're always going to want to, control us. But, and we knew that we wanted PC Principle to be back. We didn't want him to go away either. And so, luckily we came up with a thing that saved our asses on the last show, because I think the gun part's the best part of it. And the gun show was like one of my favorite
and
scenes.
it's its own, it's its own. Yeah, that guy show's really funny. Yeah, and it's his own idea. So I think for us, we kind of realized we like the serialized some elements, but each show kind of is its own show.
You know what was funny too, though? Actually, I haven't even talked to Matt about this before, but like what I've found recently, because for some reason that last show got a lot of prep, people, because it was about guns and guns control, and it was like, oh my God, look at this South Park gun control thing did. And so actually a lot of people watched just that show. And so if you watch just that show, it's fucking crazy, right? Because there's like advertisements that are people, and people talking about gentrification and how it's like PC culture and all this stuff. And yet people went right with it going, yeah, no, that's cool. It made me want to watch the season. It's like, dude, I can't believe that you could watch that show in a vacuum and not just be like, what the fuck is this stupid shit? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It becomes, and that's the thing with serialized shows, is in a way, and sometimes it's shitty and sometimes it's good, the show is always an ad for itself. The show is the tease to watch the next show. The show doesn't exist but to get you to tune in to watch again, or to keep going in the binge that you're in, that we've all fallen into that. So somehow we kind of did that in the end. We sort of make an ad for our own show.
Yeah. So it'll be really fucking fascinating to see what we do next season, because we have no idea.
I can't wait to see.
Thank you very much for watching.
All right. Thank you. Bye.